Welcome to the Ask Faleskini podcast with a guest. I'm proud to present Jay Sargeant. Jay, welcome to the show. Please tell us more about yourself.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here. I don't know what time it is where you are, but it's really early here in Los Angeles. But I'm so ready. I've been ready for the last 35, 40 minutes. I wrote a book. I'm 78 years old. In 30 days, I turned 79, and my three daughters are now adult daughters with their own kids. I've got grandchildren in college, graduating college. And I have been telling Peter a series of stories on podiums all over the world, but to my children and to my grandchildren over and over. So for the last probably 2 years, my kids come over the house and they say, Dad, your great great grandchildren will not know the Ray Sprinkle story. For God's sakes, transcribe it in some way, type it. You're a writer. You write. So I've never done it. And 7 months ago, I sat down and I wrote that memoir. And it's a great book for people who don't read much anymore because it's got no big words in it and it's funny. So I'm writing the book and all of a sudden I notice, hey, there are some patterns here. What's the big one? The big one is I'm really writing a book about reinvention because I've had seven different careers, seven different businesses I've owned, for which none of them had no experience, no credentials, and no background in them. And so I thought, boy, maybe by telling these stories, I could teach the principles. And the principles became pretty clear, Peter. No small moments, credentials are overrated, and it's never too late. Now, it's the never too late theme that probably is in synchronicity with your whole concept of midlife, right, Peter?
Yeah, I really like how you put it. The so the reinvention, and I like how you're optimistic about it because everything right now is aimed at specialization. You just have to do one thing. You have to,
Oh,
the best would be if you know what you have to do when we were 3 years old, and then just proceed until you finish college and then get the right job. And that's it. And that's your life. But, and that is how all the algorithms work. And everything works in a way, okay, we want to put you somewhere in a I say in a bracket or we want to sort you somehow. We need to understand, are you an engineer, are you a doctor, are you a lawyer, what are you, what are you doing? And I really like the idea that you can reinvent yourself and say, okay, I used to be an engineer and now I want to be something else. And I see also a huge stigma, please correct me if I'm wrong, in the US and, of course, all over the Western world. If you go from more, let's say, a recognized profession like I'm a lawyer, and then you go and I'm a carpenter now, that's a faux pas. No, no, no. So,
boy, if that's who you are, you might get a kick out of the book, but you're certainly not going to want me to be your coach because I started off as a community organizer, and from that, I became a tennis professional without ever having hit a tennis ball. Then a franchise developer, owned my own franchise development company, then an NLP trainer, then a network marketing titan, and now a pickleball coach. So I'm not the guy who did all the homework in high school, then graduated and got on some track. Now, by the way, I'm an enormous respecter of education. All three of my daughters went to wonderful colleges and blah, 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 all of that. But at the end of the day, what I teach people that have some hunger in their belly, and it's all done through storytelling, is the credential doesn't matter. If you create value, you win the day. And I'm gonna tell you a little story. What comes, if it's okay with you, Peter.
yes, of course.
I was and I don't mean to brag, I just hope the stories touch someone's heart. Went from not hitting a tennis ball to becoming the top tennis professional in New England. My hometown is Boston. We had a tennis academy, a tennis camp, 35 pros working for us, stringing money, pro shop money. It was fabulous. And then all of a sudden, Peter, and I'm speaking to someone who's out there, I just know it. Read the book, guys. I was unhappy. I was making more money than I ever needed early in my life, and I was wearing these fabulous outfits and hitting balls, and you would have thought, oh, that's the most fun thing ever. I was bored out of my mind. I just was. And I wanted out. So I called up five people, and this is my instruction manual for anyone who cares. I called up five people. They happened to be major players in New England financial areas because I taught their families. For example, I'm bragging now. The Kraft family, Bob Kraft owns the Patriots, and I taught the Kraft family when Jonathan, who's the president of the Patriots, didn't even reach my waist. He was in my tiny tot program. I called up five major people and I said, "Can I have 15 minutes of your time?" And when I got in front of them, I said, I think I have to move on. I've loved the experience of teaching you and your family, but I need the next step. I don't know who I am. You've watched me for 7 years. Who am I and what should I do with the rest of my life? I sat and I listened. Everyone gave me great feedback. And Peter, the same feedback was, Jay, with your ego, you need to sell something to someone, but you got to sell a big thing. You can't sell pencils. So someone set me up with a guy named George Nadeff. He was the most successful franchise developer. He had a franchise development company out of Boston, and they set me up with George. And when I went to his, now I was smart enough to wear a blue suit. I went and bought a suit, and I want no one can relate anymore to this, but a nice attaché case. And oh, I looked really, and I smelled good, and I looked good, and I went to that interview with George. And when I walked in, it was like, oh my good Lord, this is like. It was a massive, intimidating office. I sit in front of him, and he says, "I hear good things about you, kid. You got a great recommendation. We sell franchises here." I go, "Yeah, I hear that." He says, "So give me your resume. I'm dying to read it." I said, "I don't have a resume." He said, "You mean you came for a job interview without a resume?" I said, "Yeah, I don't have a resume." He said, "Okay, I hear good things about you. Talk me through your background. Give me your verbal resume. Tell me your business experience." And I said, "I have no business experience. In fact, I don't even like business. The last magazine I'd ever buy at an airport would be Fortune or 500. I'm buying Sports Illustrated. I'm buying Sports Magazine. I'm buying golf. I don't even play golf, but I'd rather read Golf Magazine than Entrepreneur. It's just not, I'm not interested." So now he sits and he goes, "No, wait a minute. You don't have a resume and you come in here for a job to sell something and you have no sales background and you don't even like business and we're selling a business. Don't you think this is a little bit inappropriate?" And I said, "Listen, I hear that you sell franchises by sending a guy out to the fanciest hotel in New York, San Francisco, Atlanta, and they speak for an hour in front of a crowd. If that's the way you sell businesses, I'm your man because nobody is better in front of a crowd than me. And you don't have to even believe me. I know nothing about your business. Is that your brochure?" So I picked up a threefold, remember those old threefold brochures, cheap brochure. And I said, "Bring all your owners and your top salespeople in this huge office. I'm going to go in the lobby, and in 15 minutes, I'm going to study this trifold. I'm going to come in and give a presentation in front of anyone you want to put me in front of. And if I'm good or great, hire me. And if I'm not, throw me out." Went into the lobby. Obviously, I'm only telling you this story, Peter, because there's a happy ending. Of course, I didn't know what I was talking about. And I only knew, and the people on the sidelines, the sales force that I was going to compete with, wanted to beat the daylight. I mean, I could feel the animosity surround. Who cares? I completely knocked them out. Had an audience of one, and I told the most phenomenal story for about 7 minutes. George Nadeff threw those guys out of the office. "Get out, guys, get out." He said, "Kid, you didn't say one thing right." It was the craziest presentation ever. but it was a great presentation. I can hone those edges and we can prepare you, but I want to put you on the road. So someone would say, well, how did you go from being a tennis pro to a franchise developer? And eventually I own my own franchise development company. It's called, where I come from, Peter, chutzpah. Huh? It's you got to have the nerve. It's that moment where you say, "Okay, I got no resume. I'm not going to BS you. I don't even qualify for this, but I can do the work if you give me a chance. I'm going to be the best you ever saw." So anyway, that's one of my principles are credentials are overrated. What do you think, Peter?
I'm so um, if you want to be successful, credentials are overrated. But if you're hiring your staff, you better check their credentials. That's my experience because uh, I was also taught that okay, if someone is enthusiastic, you can teach them everything, but the real life is a bit different. Uh, so so I spend a lot of my and my family's money trying to work without credentials, and then I started expecting less of people and started hiring more MBAs to run my different businesses. It was then life became much easier. So uh,
Well, you forced me into an interesting clarification because although I had no credentials for any of these reinventions, the thing that ties them all together, I was as good as anyone that ever lived.
mhm,
So when I went to the oldest public high school in the United States, formed in 1635, a year before Harvard University. It's called Boston Latin School. 1,000 kids start in the seventh grade and only 300 graduate. 700 don't even make it to the eighth grade. I got through it by not doing the work. But in not doing the work, I worked harder to not do the work than I would have ever worked to do it. And what I learned is what created the whole rest of my life. I learned for 6 years straight to stand up and give a speech about why I didn't do the work and why it wasn't my fault, why there were extenuating circumstances, why forces beyond my control, force majeure, whatever it was. But I had to do it over and over again. And for the rest of my life, the value proposition that I bring to projects for which I have very to know credentials is if they require speaking the English language, moving your hands, firing off spatial anchors, and all of that good stuff. I'm your man. So you got to have some value.
yeah, yeah, so as I said, I can see that you are contrarian. So 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 you do the things your way, and I really like that. As I said, I'm also, or I perceive myself the same. So I really like your stories, and I can relate to. But for our audience, it's important that. This works if you are independent, if you are entrepreneurial. If you're looking for a corporate job, this is a suicide train.
For sure. I want to be in sync with your message and I want to speak to the issue of the midlife concept
Mhm.
because I'm certainly not midlife by any standard unless I'm going to live to 160. But I'm beyond the midpoint. But my mantra has always been the second half of this play, it can be the masterpiece. It just makes sense because I just want people to understand what you have in the second half is an unfair advantage of what you had in the beginning because whatever you've become good at, and I'm not talking about making, everyone's not going to make these radical moves and go from being a tennis pro to a franchise developer to an NLP trainer. I understand that that's not everybody, it's a pretty radical path, but the principles are pretty much the same. I would say, listen, if you're a plumber in Akron, Ohio, why not be the best plumber in Akron, Ohio, and have one truck and have a dream of having three trucks 5 years from now and having 10 trucks? Now, how do you develop the skill set that allows you to scale from just being fabulous at the thing you do well and I hope love. And how do you scale that? So that I teach that expansive thinking. And I want to go back to middle of the life. I have an inspiration. I don't know why I'm telling this story here, but Spirit is telling me to tell this story. My inspiration is my maternal grandmother. Her name was Lillian Aronson, and then she became Lillian Jacobson. And Lil was traditional European, hair tied back tightly. She was a disciplinarian, and she raised me for 5 years because my folks got married so young that we all lived in that apartment, and my folks just took a streetcar downtown. And, they were working stiffs. And so I stayed with my maternal grandmother and Lillian, and I just loved the daylights out of her. My grandfather, her husband, was just a doll, but he was a kind of a little bit of a sap. He was so sweet, he got taken advantage of. And he opened up a little hardware store, and every construction guy knew if you didn't have any dough and you needed nails, go to Jack. He'll front you the nails. He'll get you your equipment. He'll get you your wood. So when my Papa Jack passed, my grandmother, Nana Lil, so everyone's got to write this down. Nana Lil finds a little black book at the dinky little hardware store. It's almost like a pop-up. And she sees in the book, written in pencil, all these contractors who had stiffed her husband. 787, $12.53. These are big numbers. That book represents probably four or $500 in God knows when, 1960. So what she does is, and at that period of time, was only one car in the entire family. Women didn't drive. Women of her age didn't drive throughout their life. At 65, she goes and gets a license because she's so pissed. She gets a license and she drives all over the city of Boston with that black book, bangs on a door, says, "Your husband, is he home? He owes my Jack money. We were good to him. This is a shunda. This is a sin. This is wrong. Get him here, write a check." She collected every time. But she had to get the license first. Now I got to give you the other end of this story. We could not get her to up her apartment. She's 90, 91, 93, and she's fallen. So we're really scared to death. So my mother and I go into Lil and we convince her that she's got to go to this rehab center. I mean, she went, we had to yank her out of the apartment. And then I had a gig. I was gone for 30 days. When I came back, I said, "Oh, I got to go see her. She's going to bawl me out. She's going to be so upset." I go to the rehab center and she's sitting there like a queen. She's beaming. And I said, "Hey, Nana Lo, looks like you're happy." She goes, "Oh, Jay, why didn't you fight and get me in this place 2 years earlier? 3 square meals a day, appetizers, all kinds of neat things, a cupcake in the middle of the afternoon." And Jay, when I was a little girl in Dorchester, Massachusetts, in the second grade, there was a little curly-haired boy, and I loved him so. Then we moved from Dorchester to Brighton, and that was the end. He's here at the rehab center, and we have fallen in love. I said, "You've fallen in love? What do you mean you fall?" We are met. She had her Romeo and Juliet experience from 94 to 98. 4 glorious years. And instead, Morris couldn't bring her diamond rings or anything because they didn't have any life outside the structure. So he would take a napkin and put it a muffin and put it in a napkin and bring it to her like he was sharing the Hope Diamond with her. The last time I saw them, I went to visit, and the two of them were in a courtyard with their walkers in front of them. And I sat for a couple of hours with them in a beautiful afternoon, and then I had to go. And it was getting dark, and the way I left allowed me to see the two of them without them seeing me. I was on a little walkway. But 5 minutes after I left, they get up, both of them on their walker. They waddle on their walker, and they're so in love. They're like magnets. They waddle, waddle, stop, kiss. Waddle Waddle Kiss, Waddle Waddle Kiss. It was the last I saw Nana Low. But she is my inspiration. I've changed very late in the game. I mean, I built a whole new marriage, new kids, and a new business all at once. I believe, in transformation and reinvention. And anyway, whatever. What do you think, Pete?
Amazing story. I really like it. Um, can you talked about no small moments. Can we touch that before we finish? There are no small moments. I really like the idea. Can you elaborate a bit, please?
Eventually, and I'm telling this in a little bit of a strange chronological order, so I'm trying to reorder my brain, Peter. Eventually, I leave George Nadaff, and I want to give him credit, amazing credit. I spent 1 year there. I sold probably 50, 60 franchises for him. And then, of course, I got scooped up by the very guy who gave me to him, said, "Why don't we develop our own franchise development company, Jay? You're a beast. I'll put the money in. You be the guy." So one day I had to do something which I hate to do because I'm a people pleaser, Peter. I don't like to let anyone down, but I had to do it. So I went to George, and the minute I walked in, I had rehearsed for an hour. You look in the mirror and George, oh, no, George, whatever. I do and all that. And I go in, and the minute I walk in, he goes, "Kid, sit down. I know what you're going to say. I can see it's written all over your face. You're leaving me." No problem. I knew I was renting you, not owning you. You're not the kind of guy that's going to hang around a long time. Now, let me guess. You're going to develop a company to compete with me. I said, yeah, yeah. So he said, "Hey, I love you. You love me. You did a great job. You were fabulous. And if you ever fall down and hurt yourself in that big, nasty world out there, you always have a home. The light is always on in my world." I said, "Well, Joe, it was a lovely, lovely transition." So now I'm developing, I'm a rookie. I've sold the franchises on a commission base, but I've never developed one from scratch. But George was a great teacher, so he had a methodology that was very intelligently designed. And I picked it up. That was the model. And I had some crappy little clients. I took anybody that could put, a mark on a mirror if inexpensive. So we were fooling around, first clients, not making any money. And one night I get an invitation to a fancy, fancy, fancy dinner party. Now, interestingly enough, I don't know if you can relate, Peter, but I am selectively gregarious. I would prefer to be alone in an
Mhm.
isolation tank going Om Namah Shivaya than talking with anyone on planet Earth. Do you understand?
Yeah.
But I'm very transactionally competent. So I'm invited to a party. I'm having that struggle. Should I go? I said, I better go. I got to shake it up. Maybe something will happen. I sit down and the guy next to me, I'm an old man, so some of you may not relate at all, but there was a moment in time where there wasn't an IBM computer. There were mainframes and minis, but no microcomputers in Big Blue's line. So when I enter the picture, I'm sitting next to Mitch Kapor, the developer of Lotus 123. First VisiPlot to VisiCalc to Lotus 123. I don't know anything about this microcomputer thing. It's 1981, but I'm next to this guy and he's got good looking shoes. So and I'm at a very fancy event, and it's a blessing, divine appointment in my mind. I turn to him and I start, "What do you do?" And he describes this entire thing about the microcomputer industry. There's TRS-80s and Commodore this and Trash 80s and Apple IIes. I'm listening. It's a whole new world. And I'm having the time of my life hearing about it. And I say, "Hey, Mitch, I have one of the most successful franchise development companies in America. Please underline that, gang, listener. I own one of the most successful franchise development companies in America. I'm looking for the next big thing. I don't want to ride a wave. I want to be at the beginning of the wave, so I am the wave." In what you just described to me, What should I be acquiring? He goes, well, listen, there's already 2,000 computer lands, but they don't want to sell any software. And there's only me, Lotus 123, the beginning of Microsoft, and something called Ashton Tate's DBase 2. And whoever puts a retail software store across the street from a computer land, they're walking out with a $5,000 box. You remember those days.
Yep.
And they got nothing to do. Pong. Whoop, 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 back and forth. So put a software store next to a computer land. I said, are there such a thing? He says, I don't think there is. The next day, Peter, I go and I find, I won't go through the details. I find that there are four retail stores selling software that I can find. One's right in Boston. I go down and look at that one. Horrible. I don't have much money at the moment because this little franchise development company is making nothing. But I take whatever dough I have left and I go, I'm going to travel the US and I'm going to look at these software retail stores. Washington, D.C. to Chicago to Pico Boulevard in West Los Angeles. I buy the tickets. I don't even buy a ticket home. Washington's worse than Boston and Chicago's useless. I get to Pico Boulevard on a Saturday afternoon. Now, it wasn't Baumwood Tellers or, a fancy, beautiful store. It had card tables, but they had the common courtesy to have all four of the computers with the CPM and the 5 1/4 inch floppies, all four so people could be trying out stuff. And it was packed with Caltech copter heads, but it was still packed. It had energy. It had energy. Be still my heart. So now I'm excited. I go, this is it. This is it. I go over to the counter and there's this gorgeous boy behind the counter, floppy hair. Looks like he's, a skateboarder. I think he's like, I say, hi, how are you? I'm Jay Sargeant. I'm a franchise developer. I'm a kingmaker. I give him some amazing presentation of me. And I say, I need to get to the owner right away. And he says, well, I'm a part owner. I said, well, are you a decision maker? He said, no. I said, well, how do I find this decision maker? It's a Saturday. I find out that the guy who owns the business, or at least half of the business, is George Tate of Ashton Tate. George, I mean, this is legendary. Now, I don't, it's not to me at the moment, but of course I knew, I said, well, how do I get to George? He goes, he's at Venice Beach. Now, this is Venice Beach before it was trendy and a 200 square foot condominium is $2 million. This is the old Venice Beach in 1981. I take a cab to the address. I walk up a flight of stairs, knock on a rickety door, and a guy comes out with no shirt on, cigarette in his lips, in those gym shorts we used to wear that show way too much of everything below, and his belly's hanging over. And I go, I can't believe where I'm at. This is the owner. I said, well, I'm Jay Sargeant, franchise kingmaker. Who are you? He goes, I'm George Tate of Ashton Tate. I said, oh, wow. That afternoon, on a yellow pad of paper, I signed the contract to have the exclusive rights to develop their franchise chain. And in 18 months, we sold 154 in every major city in the United States. And so, what I say to people all the time is go do anything, do something, shake it up. You can't make money on the Barca Lounger. You got to be engaged. I can't tell you how many times I've taken bad gigs. I've worked gigs that didn't make enough money, that were an insult to my intelligence, working for and consulting to a nincompoop. But in those moments, there are seeds. You don't know where the flowers are going to grow, but you got to throw the seeds into the ground. You got to nurture yourself and build your skill set. Is
Amazing story. Amazing story. So basically, the reinvention does not start with a success. Reinvention starts with the first step. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's a funny feeling, and I don't know if it's universal, but my parents had nothing except they were dreamers. They were serial unsuccessful entrepreneurs that taught me from birth to the time I left the house at 18, we're going to become rich. We're going to develop a business from scratch. And no matter how many times they tried and it didn't work, the next day they didn't care. My folks just kept going on and on till eventually they found two slots that satisfied them, that made that extra money. And of course, their biggest project that made them money was me. But in any case, that one worked out just fine for them. So, from my standpoint, there's a moment where if you feel it, you go, you know what? I wasn't meant to do this for the rest of my life. I'm being undervalued. I'm being undercompensated. There's more. There's got to be a way that I can find. I mean, live in the freest expression of social mobility in the history of the world, not without its flaws, but there's still social mobility that most of the other countries in the world envy. And if you got to just take advantage of that. The principles are you got to know who you are, know what opportunity you fit in, and then you got to take action. And many times the action is on faith because all of this is unstructured environment. You're the fourth podcast I've done. This is brand new to me. I just finished the book. The book is 1 month old. I'm going to create classes out of the book. I've got everyone I'm sure can get to my website. It's a brand, the ink's not even dry on the website. But I'm excited because over the next 2, 3 years, I'm going to build a whole new little business. So it's never too late.
Amazing. Jay, thank you for all the insights. I'm going to include a link to your webpage in the description below. And I will also include link to your book. And thank you again for being my guest tonight.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful being here.